The Beatles were undoubtedly the most influential rock band of the 20th century. They left behind a legacy that will never be forgotten. Hello, my name is Margaret, and this is my informative speech on the history of the Beatles. And I have three main points that I would like to discuss. First, how the Beatles got started out. Second, the Beatles' touring years and how they became famous. And thirdly, how the Beatles influenced the culture around them. So, when John Lennon was 16 years old, he was in a band called the Quarrymen. And he met Paul McCartney in the year 1957, and he invited Paul to join the band with him. Paul was only 15 years old at this time, but he was the rhythm guitarist of the band. Later on that year, he asked his friend George Harrison to join the band too, but John said that he probably shouldn't because George was only 14 years old. But after a month of George's persistence, John finally agreed for George to be the lead guitarist. They hired Pete Best to be their temporary drummer, but their manager, George Martin, decided that Pete Best wasn't the best drummer and they didn't really want him to be in the band. So they auditioned Ringo Starr to be the full-time drummer for the band. They called themselves the Silver Beatles, but later that August they dropped the silver part and they just called themselves the Beatles. My second point is the touring years and how the Beatles became famous. The Beatles' #1 hit for the year 1964 was Please Please Me, and that hit the top of the charts in the United Kingdom. This marked the beginning of the journey for the Beatles, and this is what really made them famous because they were not very popular at this time, but they were invited onto the Ed Sullivan Show, and they were asked to sing I Want to Hold Your Hand, and that was when all the people went crazy over them, and they really got famous during that time. And that's when the girls, like all the young teenage girls, were going crazy, and they were just fanatic over them. They were viewed, on the Ed Sullivan Show, they were viewed by 73 million viewers in 23 million households. As their population spread, a frenzied admiration for the group was begun. The band began to tour in the United Kingdom from 1960 to 1966. That was the main period of time where they were touring. And then they flew to the United States, and they landed in the John F. Kennedy airport, where they were met by 4,000 fans, screaming fans, and it was in the rain, and it was really early in the morning. It was crazy. So that's when they really became famous, and that was what started it all. My third point is how the Beatles influenced the culture and what they did to be popular. So they were very widely known for their mop-top haircut, and back in that time, they were not allowed to have hair over their ears, and the adults were not crazy about it, and they were very, they were upset the young people had hair covering their ears. Young people were even arrested, and they had their hair cut at police stations because the adults were not happy about it. And this was actually considered a sign of rebellion if you had a mop top at this time. The Beatles also wore gray suits when they performed. This was not their idea. This was their manager's idea because the Beatles wanted to be comfortable on stage. They wanted to wear blue jeans, but they decided that wearing suits would be the best idea because, because it was more professional to have on a suit. And they also had lace-up boots, which was, was very professional. In the year 1966, John Lennon wore wire-rimmed glasses called T-shaped glasses, and this was the signature element of his attire. And this is what made him famous because a lot of people, they actually called those wire-rimmed glasses, they called them John Lennon glasses because John Lennon wore them. The Beatles' music is widely popular today, and I still listen to all of their music, and I love it. Paul McCartney is still touring in the United States right now, and he just got through with the show in Nashville, Tennessee. Ringo Starr is also performing in a lot of places around the United States. John Lennon, however, was murdered on his doorstep in the 80s, sadly, and George Harrison died of lung cancer. But the The Beatles they left behind a legacy that will never be forgotten, and their music shows so much talent in how they wrote their songs. And they're some of my favorite writers of this time period. And I thank you for your time.